Hello everyone, welcome along to today's video where I'm going to be reviewing episode 4 of Class, the fairly spectacular Co-Owner of a Lonely Heart. So, well, what an episode this was. First time I watched it, it was pretty I was pretty hyped at the end of it. It was like, whoa, this is pretty chaotic. And there's a lot going on. I think it's probably my favourite episode so far. I thought it was really good, and well, it's got a cliffhanger at the end as well because it's a two-parter, as I thought, which is great. I love a good two-parter, and I mean, it was just quite a lot going on and really building to a great crescendo. I thought it was a really, really good episode. So obviously the bulk of the focus of this episode is on April and her heart and her connection to the Shadowkin, and how this is all interlinked between the two of them, how she's getting possessed essentially by the Shadowkin, at times and randomly getting out massive swords that the Shadowkin has, and threatening her dad. That seems to be the bulk of the story, which was fairly interesting, I think, and it's slightly weird that's kind of her heart had been completely normal for 2 episodes. She hadn't been possessed at all, or nothing had been relevant, and then suddenly now she's being consistently possessed by the Shadowkin. That was slightly odd. I'm guessing that was to do with these sort of Shadowkin's attempts to get his heart back with these 2 fairly useless other Shadowkin people, whatever their names were, who were trying to connect his heart back or something like that. It was all a little bit confusing and hard to understand in this all very dark and they have kind of muffled voices as well, so that's kind of difficult to understand at times. But I really like the setting of the Shadowkin world. It's all this very dark place, and I really like this sort of blurred effects they use, because they have these little sort of, it seems like little sort of singes of fire kind of raising up on the screen all the time, and this interesting slightly blurred out of focus effect, which I think works really well to make it look very alien and otherworldly, and like it's a world of kind of fire and flame and darkness. I think it's really well constructed as a sort of, considering it looks like the budget for their CGI isn't the greatest ever. It doesn't look particularly high, particularly looking at the dragon from episode 2. That was pretty naff CGI. I think it wasn't their greatest effort. But looking at it looks like they put a lot of money into the budget for the Shadowkin world, because it really does look spectacular. I'm really impressed with it. And the Shadowkin race, I don't know, maybe they're a little bit your kind of your generic sort of warrior, dark warrior race. A little bit. They're not very well developed. We don't see many of the Shadowkin people other than the King Shadowkin and a couple of helper guys trying to fix his heart. That's about all we've seen of them. I guess maybe we'll see more in the future, and it does seem just like there's this one room lot. There's no kind of civilization as such, it seems, on the Shadowkin world. I can't actually remember what the world's called. If it has a name, I'm not sure. So that's kind of slightly makes them a little bit one-dimensional, I guess, that you don't really know much about them and they seem very much just warriors. But they're still an interesting race to kind of get to know, and they're very well constructed visually. I think they're very well done. And so this episode focuses on that connection that the Shadowkin leader has with April and their hearts being shared, as it were. And we see right from the off when the Shadowkin leader first tries to get his heart back and how this affects April, and she's suddenly growing massive swords and attacking people and stuff, and it's all a bit chaotic. And she's got this weird thing, I'm not quite sure how it works, where she can heal herself. Does that mean the Shadowkin can heal themselves? It didn't seem like they could, but cuts on her hands and stuff seem to heal themselves, which slightly confused me as to how that actually happens. So I'm not quite sure. Let me know if you kind of understand why that is. I don't really get it personally. But whatever, we'll let him go for that. So then we get a whole scene, quite an interesting scene in the school, in a lesson with April about war and how we can't identify with soldiers. And obviously it was channeling a bit of the Shadowkin's attitude in her, kind of their merged attitudes of warrior and war and stuff, and a bit of April as well, combining into this slightly more fiery and sinister kind of person, with all this stuff about you shouldn't be a coward in war, you should just face it and die. When you sign up for the army, you're signing up to die. It's all quite brutal stuff. Has some truth in it, it's fair to say, but it is quite an interesting scene, but it's all quite brutal. And then she suddenly realises at the end what she's saying, and sort of stops a bit. So that was a really good scene. I really like that sort of scene. It's an interesting insight into how maybe we don't see war as in soldiers, whereas they actually are. They are cowards. It was just very interesting, I thought. And obviously we get through that. Ram and April's relationship is continuing, slightly randomly appearing in the last episode. Whee! Randomly, dearie me. That's a terrible pun. Thank you. Pun of the day. But this relationship suddenly kind of jumps to them having sex, which was a little bit kind of disjointed and a bit sudden. I think it's kind of developed out of nowhere a little bit after the last. It sort of suddenly appears in the last episode to almost set up this happening in this episode. It feels a bit like And it was kind of like they created your stereotypical sex scene with the music and the way it was led on, cheesy lines and stuff. It was all just kind of felt a bit forced and generic. It probably wasn't the greatest sort of scene in the world, really. And then there was the bizarre alien sex connection as well. So you had the Ram and April sex scene and gay alien sex scene, which was bizarre, to say the least. And I'd kind of read a few tweets which suggested that was what was happening, but to see it actually happening was slightly odd. I don't think we've ever had alien sex in that sense in any Hooniverse stuff before. Even Torchwood never went quite... They always looked human when they were having sex rather than actually looking like aliens and doing it. So that was a little bit odd and unexpected. But it happened, and I don't really know what to think about it, to be honest. It was just a bit odd, and then the "can we cuddle" line at the end was slightly bizarre. So yeah, it was just thoroughly odd, really. The human sex scene was sort of a bit forced and almost parodying itself, kind of thing. Your very stereotypical scene, and then the alien one was just bizarre, I think, is how I would sum it up. And obviously the sex scene had to end with the mum coming in. I can't actually remember what April's mum's name is, I'm sorry. It had to end with her coming in and seeing them all and all going, "Oh dear, this is shocking," kind of thing. That's, again, stereotypical style there. It's just based on stereotypes. A lot of this series is kind of based on stereotypes. All the main characters are stereotypical characters and scenes and stuff. It's just... I guess because you've got so many main characters, you've kind of got to steal from stereotypes a little bit to be able to sort of have a basis for a character, because you simply don't have that much time to develop each character. So you've got to start off on a stereotype to really get it going, I think. And that can sometimes be a little bit of a letdown, I think, for the show. But it doesn't work terribly in this. It just feels a little bit forced. The whole Ram-April relationship and stuff clearly just try and develop the characters a little bit. So it's not the greatest thing the show's done so far. And this episode also introduces the character of April's dad, who we've heard a little bit about. One of the main character's disaster sort of lines is that their dad had tried to kill the two of them, had killed his wife, April's mum, and her, and her mum's been paralysed and all this, and he's been in prison now. He's out of prison. He's not supposed to go and see them, but he does. And then we get the whole April rage scene combined with the Shadowkin's rage, and April's rage equals her trying to kill her dad. I think it's kind of a culmination of all the rage she feels inside about her dad, adding a bit of the Shadowkin to kind of bring it out, and bang, she's trying to kill her dad with massive swords, which is quite drastic. And at the end, I genuinely wasn't sure whether she was actually going to kill her dad or not. I really wasn't sure. It seemed kind of unlikely that she actually would, but it was borderline, particularly as it seems as the whole idea of it was kind of the Shadowkin's action were being mirrored by April's and vice versa. They were mirroring each other's actions, and the Shadowkin did kill this guy. I can't actually remember his name. Was it Arius or Darius or Orius or something like that? I think it was like something Rius. I can't really remember. It's not particularly important, but that was that. And so I did think as the Shadowkin had killed this helper person who'd had a bit of fun with him as well, which was always bizarre. I did think that that April would actually kill her dad at that stage, so I was quite surprised when she just decided, I'll stick him by the side of him to scare him, kind of thing. Considering she'd already slit his shoulder as well, or his arm open a bit, I did think, well, surely you're going to finish the job at this stage. So I was slightly surprised it didn't, but that was a nice culmination to that little bit there, with her going a bit crazy and being possessed and stuff, and it was all going off really in that sort of situation bit, but I'll come back to that ending bit soon. And so it was very much just April plus a bit of Ram, and that was it for your main characters. There was nothing else. The other three mainish characters of Tanya, Charlie and Matthias were doing nothing in this episode. We got a bit of an explanation of what the Cabinet of Souls is. It's still slightly confusing, but essentially all these souls of all the people who died in all the Rhodians are in this little cabinet thing, which is why it's called the Cabinet of Souls. They live in there, but they can be used to destroy other souls or something, and so it can be used as a weapon, and it can be used to bring... And also the secret was that it can be used to bring them all back to life, to replace a race. So presumably at the end of the series, it's going to come to the stage where Charlie has the choice of bringing all the Rhodians back to take over the human race, I'd imagine, or whether he has to let them die, like permanently die. And I'm sure that'll be a choice. It seems so obvious that that's the sort of thing that's going to come up. Do I save my race but kill the human race, or let them all die? It's got to be that, surely. I mean, let me know if you think something else, but I feel fairly confident that's the sort of storyline that's going to come up in the finale. And his choice, he'll want to save his race. The others will try to stop him, and it'll all go off, and it'll be a bit the tension and drama and stuff, I imagine, but we'll have to wait and see. So it was all these kind of vague explanations of this Cabinet of Souls. It was all a little bit confusing, and Matthias not being particularly happy with Charlie for not really telling him too much about all this. Tanya's getting annoyed with Charlie because he's ordering around Miss Quill. This stuff feels secondary to the plot. And that was, I think, one of the downfalls of this episode, is there seems to be 2 or 3 completely different storylines going on that seem completely unconnected at the moment. I don't know whether they'll all become together in the second part, but at the moment, we've got this whole April and Ram, her connection with the Shadowkin, that whole thing with her parents and stuff. That's all one story. The main focus of this story, the one that I'm invested in most. You've got all this conflict between Charlie and Matthias, and a bit of Tanya as well with Miss Quill, and all those 4 getting all a bit unhappy with each other about it all. And then you've got this random invasion of the killer petals thing, which seems to be completely on the side and nothing to do with the plot, and you feel like doesn't really fit into the episode yet. It's an interesting idea. I think it's kind of been done with the cubes in Doctor Who Power of 3. These sort of normal things that are suddenly appearing and multiplying, and then eventually they're going to start killing people and stuff. It feels like they've kind of copied that idea a little bit, which is kind of, I like it when they do more original stuff than copying, but it's still an interesting idea, and presumably it's going to become more of a thing in the second parts. But at the moment it feels like it's just a complete sideline story, that's something that you want to explore more, but that's getting nothing really going in this episode at all. It's just like this weird new head teacher that's clearly probably an alien, or connected to the governors who are clearly aliens. The governors have got to be aliens, I think, at this stage, because of the way that they seem to know. If you pause it on when they have a shot of Charlie's file, it's clear that they know all about the alien stuff, that he's a Rhodian and all this stuff about Miss Quill and everything. So they're aliens, or have some sort of alien knowledge or whatever. They can create robots as well. So there's all some sort of alien threat going on there, which will be interesting to see towards the end of the series, I sense. That'll come to fruition towards the end. But it was just another plot point. The sort of Dorothea, this new headmaster, was another plot point that isn't getting much exploration at the moment, then just kind of felt sidelined to this main plot of the April and the Shadowkin. So it felt like there were too many things being put into the episode. Sometimes it's something that Moffat does a bit much of, sticking loads of ideas into an episode and then not exploring any of them as much as you'd like, or picking the one not very good idea and exploring that, which happens sometimes. And it felt a bit like that was happening in this episode. I didn't think that the Shadowkin and April storyline was that bad. It was quite it's something that I'm interested in. I want to see how it develops through the series, but there were so many other ideas in the episode that I would have liked them to sort of go into a bit more, and they just didn't. So I'm hoping that they can redeem that in the second part. Maybe that's why they didn't go into it here, because it's going to all become explained in a lot more in depth in the second part. But I somehow don't know that's going to happen. We're going to get a sort of short alien invasion with these petals. It'll be solved by some simple method that'll make them all disappear or something, while we focus on April and Ram attacking the Shadowkin on their home planet or whatever. I think that'll be the bulk of the story. But we'll have to wait and see. And so now that everything else that happens in the episode has been pretty much wrapped up, we get towards the end of the episode after April's tried to kill her dad. The Shadowkins found April, so he's going to be coming back to her. So April decides, yeah, I'm going to go to the Shadowkin's home planet and attack him, pretty much. But before that, she does this bizarre thing of sticking her hand inside her mum's chest for about a good 20-25 seconds. Her mum appears to be in pain, and then she collapses, but it's not seen fine. And I'm slightly confused as to actually what she's done. There's no explanation in this episode of what she's done. Initially, I thought, because of the thing about her being able to heal herself earlier in the episode, I thought, that must mean that she's put her arm inside her mum so that it would heal her paralysed legs. I thought that was what it was, and it suggested that because her leg was slightly moving when she's lying on the floor. And I'm fairly sure that sort of when you're at that stage of paralysed, you don't really have any feel in your legs, so you can't move them at all. And you can see that her leg is slightly moving, and the shot's clearly made so you can see that happening. It looks like April and Ram are looking at her legs. But then you look at the next time trailer, and she's back in the wheelchair again, so I'm slightly confused as to what actually happened there. I'm sure it'll be explained in the second episode, but let me know if you have any more of an idea of what's going on there than I do. Is it something to do with the hearts and connecting their hearts or what? I'm not quite sure. It's all rather confusing and didn't really make much sense. I'm sure once it's watched the second episode, it'll become clear, but at this stage I really don't know what's going on. So that was a little bit sort of abrupt, and I would have liked something to go on for the next episode. But I'm sure we'll get it soon, and so we get April opening up the tear because she just magically can get these swords and just swipe through thin air and open up cracks, because that's how it works for plot convenience and all that. Not really sure how that worked, but it did. And then her, and of course Ram, because the hero guy who's all sort of fancies April and has sex with her, he's got to go and help her, jump through the cracks and go and help her with it all. That's how it works in stereotypical TV shows like this. I mean, yeah, that was a bit sort of a stereotype there, but whatever. I'll let him go. I'll let it go for now. We'll see how it pans out next week. So they're all off gone to the Shadowkin's home planet, wherever it is. I will find out for next week what it's called, if it has a name, because I really need to stop saying the Shadowkin's home planet. We'll be better to have a name for them. So they're living there, and they've jumped through to there, and then we get sort of shock reaction shots of Tanya going, "What's happening?" And then we cut to the credits. So it was a pretty shocking end. At the time, it was kind of like, what just happened? It was really exciting. I mean, watching it a second time, it's still quite an exciting ending. Personally, I think it's a really kind of, I love those dramatic cliffhanger endings that we have. That sort of unexpected. It was genuinely unexpected sort of things happening. I did not really expect that. I certainly didn't expect this thing with April suddenly sticking her hand through her mum, and then those two going into the Shadowkin's home. Well, I really did. It was all shocking and surprising to me. Maybe it's because I hadn't read enough about it. I don't know, but that's what I love about cliffhangers, is when there's actually a shock, so it was really good to have that, and I thought that was one of the highlights of the episode. So before I ramble on too long, this video is going on a bit longer than I planned, so I better wrap it up now. Personally, I really enjoyed this episode. There were some fairly obvious flaws in the episode, that there were too many ideas in it that weren't explored very well. The sex scene was a bit cheesy and stereotypical, but sort of the bulk of the episode, this connection between the Shadowkin and April is working really well. I think the sort of way they did it with the interlinking shots between the Shadowkin and April and showing how much of a connection they have, I think will work really well in the episode to highlight that, and just kind of kept us involved in the plot in both senses, I think. So that was a really good technique that they used throughout this episode, really, which I think made it really good. And overall, therefore, I'd give it probably the best episode of the series so far. I think it was a better. I know a lot of people seem to disagree. I saw some reviews saying this episode's terrible, essentially. I don't agree. I thought it was really good. But that's just me. Maybe you think it wasn't so good. I'd say it's just ahead of the first episode. The last two I thought weren't so great. The first episode was good, and this is just a tad better, so somewhere just above an 8 out of 10 probably. Not the greatest thing since sliced bread, but a very good episode, probably the best so far, and I think there's a lot of potential for it to build on in the second episode with this whole petal alien invasion thing, and the whole Shadowkin and April line, and them seemingly going into some sort of sword battle, it looks like is going to be going on there, which will be interesting to watch, I sense, next week. And so finally, just something I wanted to mention that I'd seen rumoured around. Watch out now, this is a spoiler alert, do skip 30 seconds if you do not want to hear this spoiler, but I have read somewhere that apparently one of the main characters dies at the end of the series, and I was just wondering who you think it's going to be, who's going to die, if it does actually happen. Obviously, it seems likely it's going to be April at this stage, just with the way her heart's going on and all this stuff about fighting a war against the world. So the obvious choice would be it's going to be April, but maybe they'll do the sort of shock turn thing, and it's actually the one you least expected, like Tanya or something, I don't know. But let me know in the comments below, maybe you want to spoiler it or whatever, or you don't want to say it, I don't know. But if you would like to, let me know who you think might succumb to that fate. So well, that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you made it this far, fantastic. Really thank you for that. I love it when people really do watch my videos and engage. So let me know what you thought of this episode. I thought it was great. Do you agree with me? Remember to like the video, subscribe if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon from the video. Goodbye.